in Mexico is one of the countries with the high levels of inequality. So it depends on the statistics you use, but more or less 50% of the population lives in poverty. The other thing is that there's a very high percentage of people who work in the informal sector. So informal means they do not have formal jobs with social security. So these are very huge, challenges. And of course, we come here with very homogeneous recommendations. Like here in Mexico, they say, like in many countries also, quédate en casa, stay at home, and also sana distancia, the famous social distancing. But these are recommendations which are unfortunately not feasible for a large portion of the population. So, especially if you have people living in poorer neighborhoods of Mexico City, for instance, they have poorer housing where many family members have to share the same housing, the same home, the same room. So the social distancing is not very realistic. Also, if you work in the informal sector, you have to leave your home. You have to work to get access to food to survive. They're not people who have large amounts of savings. So I think that these are different realities. So what I would say is there's an urgent need also from the international cooperation to come up with much more specific recommendations and solutions. But what I also want to stress, and what I can see I think I can see it with regards to the international cooperation, three major trends. One is I would say there's this a very negative trend, which is, and I will explain, and then there's a mediocre trend, and then there's another one which I would say is more positive. So the very first one, the negative, is of course we're facing more and more countries it's not only the individual confinement, but also I would say confinement at the social level, at the country level. So countries are shutting down also. There's more more nationalism, more protectionism, more racism, more xenophobia. And they're thinking much in their own trade, in their own solutions, without thinking of the importance of international cooperation and multilateralism. Then I would say there's also a tendency what I would call the mediocre one, which is these are all these fantasies of that we could return to the reality before the pandemic, which I think they just want to continue with the situation as before. But I think the situation as before did not function very well for, I would almost say, for the majority of the population of this planet. So, and then we have also, I think, the third one, which is a very positive trend. And the positive trend is that, there's a huge activity of all kind of development practitioners, especially, which are coming together to these virtual conferences, trying to shape, the international cooperation agenda, to come up not only to think of a coordinated response with regards to this health crisis, but also, I would say, to push towards a more systemic change. We have huge challenges, and as I mentioned at the beginning, this crisis comes only at the top of other crises. One of the most famous ones, most important ones, is of course the climate change crisis, but also the deepening and the inequalities, social inequalities. You name it. There are many crises, and I think there are very good discussions and debate ongoing. And now this brings me to my next point. I think we have these debates at the macro level. And then we have the agency and the needs and the interests and the strategies at the micro level. So I'm going to explain this. So at the macro level, you have international financial institutions like the World Bank, International Development Bank, the IMF, etc. You name them, and the G20, etc. And then these are I would say, the big makers and shakers of international cooperation. Of course, you have also this multinational corporations and also huge, important private foundations like the Bill Gates Foundation. And then you have at the micro level, at the very beginning, I tried to say, all these populations in situation of vulnerability, of extreme vulnerability. And through this pandemic, there are, inequalities and vulnerabilities, which are multiple, are being like deepened. But the thing is, of course, these populations have their own strategies to survive. They survive through family networks, networks of solidarity between neighbors, coming up with, to look after the food security of others, to access to medication, etc. But their agencies are completely, or not completely, but very much disconnected from this discourses, debates at the global level of this macro makers and shakers of international cooperation. And I would like to stress, and maybe this is very important for the students also. What we need to promote is like a connection, a bridge between both levels. And I think it's a responsibility, and also it's very important of the research community, of academics, of students, etc., civil society organizations, local governments, even of international cooperation agencies which are embedded in the local context, to connect both levels, the macro and the micro level. So we need like facilitators, brokers, communicators, connectors, which make visible especially the needs and the agency in political terms, and the strategies and proposals which are coming from these populations in situation of vulnerability. And currently in this debate, I don't see that. What I can see there, like, of course, at the macro level is very important. You have like very important discussions and debates, like, for instance, what to do about this perceived a real dichotomy between the economy and climate change. Okay, what to do about health and the economy. So is it either or can we think of more systemic approaches, responses, more integral ways to tackle them? What about, of decarbonization of our economies? I think it's another very important topic. What to do, for instance, also with the boom of plastic? Everybody is using. Sorry, I have some interference here. Are you hearing me?
Hello? Yes. It's very clear.
Messages coming up about that there's some interference. No, what can we do as a society with the boom of plastics? Like everybody has now his or her masks and the protection of by plastics to guarantee the distancing, etc., etc. So then there, of course, what is our relationship with nature, for instance? So there are many like very in-depth and very important debates ongoing, but unfortunately, I would say they are still at the very macro level. They are disconnected with the micro level. So it's the role of the meso level of guys like you and I to connect this level. So I would say.
This is super interesting. I think we knew it, but it's interesting to hear it. Okay, to put a structure in one of the biggest problem. Now, my question, a stupid question maybe, but is it not a problem that existed before COVID-19 and that today it's just right in your face because it's so real that it was that disconnection between the reality of the majority of the population and it's only much more increased the disconnection. I'm asking that question, and it's very interesting. But this morning I received a little video from a Mapuche, obviously Mapuche in Chile, and not in those good structure as you put it, but in a very I won't say, in a basic way, how this disconnection is so present between, let's say, the world of the politician and the bankers and the rest of the population. Now, that's my question. And the other question, how international cooperation has to revisit the way that they were doing things also at the same time. Anyways, that's my two questions.
No, thank you. Of course, Pierre, I completely agree. We have seen these tensions, of course, before, but now we have this epidemic, which is like, comes right into our face, our faces. So we can't wait. For the climate change debate, there are many voices which are saying like climate change is completely urgent. We have to tackle it now, etc., etc. But I think the vast majority think, there is some change. It will not affect maybe me directly, maybe in 5, 10, 20 years. It's not that immediate. This is immediate. It has impacted the whole humanity almost at the same time. Of course, it started in several regions with more like presence, like in others, etc. But I think it's right. It was like a slap into our face. And of course, it also brought the development discussion, and also it has redirected the debates that we have to focus on the really important stuff. So before it was like climate change, okay, but we continue with the growth of economy, like unlimited growth without really substantial changes.
I lost the last 10 seconds. I don't know, Camille, you lost it? No? Okay, I'm the only one who lost it. Okay, I'm sorry. It was frozen. Camille and you were like that anyways. So sorry. Let's redo it. Sorry. I'm sorry.
I was just saying that what I can see, that the debate, especially of the model of development, has deepened now, has become urgent. So before the crisis, there was there was some people interested in climate change, more and more people, fortunately, but there was still not a deep questioning of I think, a very fundamental dilemma, our lifestyles, which were embedded in this fetishism of the unlimited economic growth. And I think this is what it's at the core issue. Can we continue like this? The answer is obviously not. Of course we can, but then I think we will put under risk more people, especially once again the ones who are not making it, which cannot protect themselves like other people, like the elite or the middle class, for instance. No. And I think it has become very evident, and I think it's like this aha moment. It has to happen now or never. Okay, maybe we wait for 2 to 3 years for the vaccine, and then we go back to the normal before, which I already criticized. But I think this is no guarantee that a crisis like this will reappear. And it's not, and also the climate change crisis will not go away. And also not the deepening levels of poverty, especially as a consequence of this crisis, will not go away. So I think we can't continue business as usual. And also this international cooperation. The international cooperation has to step up. It has to be democratized. And I think especially also here in Latin America, you have seen over the last years, there's been a deep crisis also of multilateralism in Latin America. So you have countries like Venezuela, Brazil, Mexico, etc., Nicaragua, where you have a deep, I would say, divided national level, governance crisis, and Colombia also, etc. But then this divides at the national level also reflect themselves at the regional level. So it has become increasingly difficult to establish a common agenda of international cooperation. And middle income countries like Brazil or Colombia, and also Argentina and Mexico, they have lost a little bit. They are very important, influential voices. They had to make the voices of the global south, and especially also of the BRICS country and the middle income countries, heard at the international fora. So I think there's a chance to reinvent themselves and to become once again the spearheads of very progressive thinking, I hope. So for instance, Mexico, I think last week pushed at the UN declaration for the free and universal access to vaccine, the future vaccine, hopefully. So this kind of showing presence at the UN fora, and I would say also at the fora like very influential ones in international cooperation, like the G20, is very important.
There's a lot of food for thought there. Do you have a book? Do you have something in writing that we could follow? It's you should write something. It's futuristic. It's important. It's crucial. It's still in ebullition. It's still I don't know how to say it, but you see some sparks of a new theory that you are putting on the table, Marcus. I'm always amazed by your thinking. Now, what can the students do with that? I mean, you said disconnect. Global South must be again a leader. There's room for progressive thinking. Can you suggest? And maybe you didn't have time to think about it, but just there, cold like that, can you give us one or two examples where this connection of progressive in progressive thinking that a country or a movement could work or be active on that?
Yeah, I would say like guys which are like middle-aged like me, we always have been thinking the same way. So, but you're now, you come with this fresh thinking, fresh ideas. Also, how to use much better than our generation. I would say the use of the modern technologies, the social networks, etc. So I think you can communicate much better than my generation. This kind of more abstract communication. It's not like face to face like before, right? Or like publications in academic books and journals and this kind of stuff. So it's not the same sort of communication. And I think also what is important is to think about, in ethical terms. Of course, you're sitting there, I'm sitting here, you're at the university at home, I'm sitting at home, I have a computer, I have internet, we are the privileged ones. So I think, how can we, and this is what once again, I'm just like repeating myself, how can we focus our agency in terms of political activism, I would say, or political actions? How can we support, the visibility of what's going on the ground? What's going on with people who don't have the same access to the same, fora, to the same, are not privileged to research and to study at like prestigious university like the University of Ottawa or Carleton University or the UNAM in Mexico. So how can we help to shape the discussions? And, also, I think for instance, I just had this before this meeting, I had a conference call, a webinar with the Mexican International Cooperation Agency. And, I tried to propose what is so important is this dialogue between academics and practitioners to come up with new ideas. And not only this like high theoretical debates, which are very much important, but I think also to come up with very concrete suggestions. And these concrete suggestions should not be written at your office, in my living room. No, they should come, from really the people who are most affected by this crisis. And of course, once again, these people who are most affected with this crisis, they have not the same means to connect with people who can influence. You can influence, but there are people who have much more, the institutions who have much more power, and they're looking for ideas. They're looking for new agendas. They're looking because they're looking for your thinking, for your collective construction efforts, to contribute to change. It sounds like very, hitch, but I think it's like that.
So, Camille, I'm sure you have a question.
I do. You know me too well. I'm wondering, so we spoke to someone a few weeks ago who was saying like you that it can't be business as usual, things need to change. But he seemed to be a little bit cynical about the idea in the sense that as much as things should change, he didn't seem to believe that they really would. So my question for you is, do you think that at the end of the day, the pressure from the global south, for the sake of the whole world, for the sake of the whole global community, do you think that things can really change?
I don't think in this black, there's lots of black and white thinking. So you can hear very pessimist voices who say, okay, this will be like before. In 2 to 3 years, we'll, the same air traffic, the same consumption models, whatever. And I'm a little bit inclined. I think this might happen. And then there are like very idealistic voices. For instance, I'm participating also in interurban networks. So they say now that's the time to imagine the city in a very complete different way. More bike lanes, more participation, more different forms of housing, whatever. I think there are lots of gray zones, and the gray zones are like the opportunities. Of course, I think we need like the big thinking, but we need also the concrete solutions, and they won't change because there's like very powerful forces which, of course, not interested in a fundamental change. But they're also like there's I would say a huge populations which are very much interested in change. And the whole thing is also, the loss of legitimacy of states, of international cooperation, of key actors. And then there's also, especially in countries where there are no safety nets, there's this danger and threat of social unrest, especially if they're facing like extreme things like hunger and for more and more exclusion to basic common global goods. So I think there will be like maybe some. Sorry, this is I have not the crystal, to see the future, but I just want to say there will be some development, very positive development. So maybe there will be people will think about how can we avoid this very energy intensive lifestyles? How can we think of avoiding this plastic boom which I mentioned? Of course, how can we do everyone in his or own lives? How can we change our ways of transportation in a city, for instance? This kind of thing. So there will be many small changes, I think. Hopefully there will be also like bigger ones. And, but the thing is, once again, I'm like, this is a little bit cynical. We also as international corporation, we have been working for this big change for many, many years. And there has been so much investments and so much good ideas also, and also good practice on the ground. But still, so many people live in poverty, are excluded, cannot participate in this, enjoying this global common goods as they should. So I think, yes, if you want to hear my very personal idea, I think we will, many things will be like business as usual as before, but still, now it's the moment to change as many things as we can do. And no one can just do on individually. We need like critical, constructive thinking, new solutions. Many of them are very technocratic, maybe. I don't know. And I'm, a social scientist. I don't know of green technologies, this kind of stuff, of how to decarbonize our economies, come up with some very convincing, concrete approaches. Yes. So, and then I believe also very much what the people who are like excluded, they come up already with their own response. When you say we need more systematic, integral approaches, they are living this reality. They are like facing all these complex realities in their daily life. They're coming up with solutions. Maybe I think our role as researchers, as students, as experts is like to help them to make their solutions maybe more better from our knowledge. It's also like, I think it's also like the famous knowledge sharing, but in a very respectful and, humble way, I would say. So I'm not coming like an expert, you have to do this and that. No. And I wouldn't trust only the big recommendations of the big international financial institutions, of the big actors. No. But sometimes they're so very generous. The very interesting thing is some of the actors, like who work for international cooperation, they are like being, I would say, co-opted by these macro actors who are at the, who are causing some of the systemic problems many people face and the planet faces. So we have to become more critical, more suspicious, but of course we have to try all the time to shape and to influence working towards big thinking, better big thinking, but also towards concrete solutions.
If Marcus, if we add a little work to ask to the student, a little tarea. So between some Canadians and some Chileans, some Colombians, what, like, if you were the professor, you're in the class, they have 2 weeks to work on it, or a few hours, I don't know, because they have free time. And what could you ask him? Think about a project that you could do with Latin America or a Latin American to enhance or to propose to the class to have a better life.
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, I think, of course, when the crisis started, I was also thinking, what can I do? And I did some very things. Okay, I can support elderly people who cannot do shopping, something very, very concrete. And then I thought, okay, they've invited me to this kind of webinars, then I can contribute with some ideas, etc. And of course, we are adapting also the projects we are doing at the UN, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. So I try to adapt the projects, to respond better in this crisis. But I would say, as students, I think I would come up, if I would be like you, Pierre, as the professor, I would ask them maybe, okay, why don't you think of setting up a network of critical, thinkers, of young, new ideas of innovation, and maybe they could be like 3 dimensions. One could be to influence the, the big thinking, the big picture. So, they're like this is almost philosophically, I would say. And we have all these famous philosophers, but they, of course, they were being criticized that they are not very concrete. Then you could have another group thinking, okay, because everybody's different. Not very many people can do everything what I'm going to suggest. So one group could do could think of the big theory, the big picture, okay, and how we can envision positive change. And then you could have a bunch of people who could think of coming up with very concrete solutions. Okay, if I have people using more masks now, what are we going to do with these masks? Whatever, I don't know. What can we do as a society with the boom of plastics? Everybody has now his or her masks and the protection of by plastics to guarantee the distancing, etc., etc. So. Then there, of course, what is our relationship with nature, for instance? So there are many very in-depth and very important debates ongoing, but unfortunately, I would say they are still at the very macro level. They are disconnected with the micro level. So it's the role of the meso level of guys like you and I to connect this level. So I would say.